Shalom. The Parsha for this week is Vayeitzei, which means, and Jacob left. Genesis chapter 28, verse 10, and Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. Now, the readings for this Parsha for this week is Genesis 28:10 to chapter 32, verse 3. And when do we read this Parsha? It is read November 29, 2014 for this year, November 21, 2015, and December 10, 2016. Now, let us study the summary of this Parsha. And Jacob dreams of angels going up and down a ladder, and God blesses him. Jacob names the place Bethel in chapter 28, verse 10 to 22. Jacob works 7 years in order to marry Rachel, but Laban tricks Jacob into marrying Leah, Rachel's older sister, in chapter 29, verse 16 to 25. Jacob marries Rachel, but only after having to commit himself to 7 more years of working for Laban, that is in 29, 26 to 30. And Leah, Rachel, and their maidservants Bilhah and Silpha gave birth to 11 sons and 1 daughter in 29, 31 to 30, verse 24. And Jacob and his family leave Laban's household with great wealth in chapter 31, verse 1 to chapter 32, verse 3. The Well of Fortune. In Hebraic ancient culture and tradition, the wells give life by providing not only water, but also a meeting place for our ancestors to find their mates or make a covenant. Fortune is defined as a hypothetical or personified power that unpredictably determines events and issues favorably or unfavorably. Now, in this Parsha, in this Vayeitzei, Jacob met his beloved Rachel at the well, and he got struck by love at first sight. He rolled away a heavy stone covering the mouth of the well to water Rachel's flock. And this is where the life-changing story of Jacob began. Now, there are many interesting interpretations of this encounter at the well, and it abounds much. Perhaps it is self-evident that the well would serve as such as a good idiom or metaphor in some cases, so ripe for midrashic interpretations. And midrashic is part of the Jewish exegesis of the scripture, which is pardes. And as we recall, the pardes is a Jewish exegesis that represents peshat, which is plain and simple, the remes, the midrash, and the sod, which is mystical. Now, wells are characterized by depth, which is deep, and their contents give life, which is water. The well in our scene requires an act of strength to access its life-giving waters. It does not simply flow of its own accord. Now, it is very interesting that in the Brit Kadashah, there is a parallelism of Genesis 29, verse 1 to 3, and John chapter 4, verse 1 to 26, also known as the woman at the well or the Samaritan woman. Now, we can see here in our Parsha that we are talking about a patriarch Jacob. Now, in Genesis, it was his well. It is Jacob's well. So, in Genesis 29, Jacob is in the well. On John chapter 4, it is Jacob's well. Now, in Genesis 29, Jacob escaped from Esau, but on the Brit Kadashah, Yeshua evaded the Pharisees. Because if we read John chapter 4, verse 1 to 26, Yeshua learned that the Pharisees discovered that he is baptizing and gaining more disciples than John or Yohanan the Baptizer. And in Genesis 29, Jacob met Rachel, who will take care of him because he escaped from Esau and he has no one, while the Samaritan woman found Yeshua, who will take care of her. So, and what is very interesting is Genesis is the first book of the Bible. Now, John may not appear to be the last book of the Bible, but if we study the history of the Christian church, the Gospel according to Yohanan is the last book written by John the Apostle, because it was written for the believers in Asia Minor towards the end of John's life, around early 2nd century. So it is very interesting that the first book written and the last book written were talking about the same thing. And it is in the well, and it talks about life. So we have to ponder in this Parsha on when Jacob met his first love, Rachel, and the Samaritan woman found her last love, Yeshua. For we know that the Samaritan woman has many husbands. As a matter of fact, when Yeshua asked her, "Call your husband," then she said, "I have none." And he said, "You are right when you said you have none. As a matter of fact, you have 5, and the man that you're living now with is not even your husband." So we see here that in the well, both found the one true love. The first love of Jacob, the last love of the Samaritan woman. I hope and pray that this little Parsha will make us excited and give us the desire to know more about the scripture and to even further our study in both the Torah and the Brit Kadashah. Shalom.